Hi, welcome to Care Lab.
Happy 4th of July. It's our 4th of July episode.
Yeah,
Thanks for
I'm
listening,
excited.
Care Lab. Thanks. Hi, Brandy. How are you?
I'm doing good, and I'm excited about the holiday.
I am too. I love 4th of July. It's actually one of my favorite holidays.
And why is that?
Um, so many. So I love holidays where there's no obligatory gift giving.
Good
Um,
point.
because I find that to be like stressful and not as satisfying as just giving a gift because, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, but also it's also like near my birthday, so that's a thing too. But
Good. Double celebration.
it's just a great kind of community celebration. And this is going to sound super this is going to sound so corny, but I am the kind of person, like, I love being part of something that's bigger than just me. And
Okay.
I love it when everyone is kind of coming together to to celebrate, or same for Thanksgiving, like everyone kind of comes together to be thankful. And so I love that kind of holiday. Also,
Hmm.
like food and like being outside with family. It's all good. It's just all good. I love it all.
You love it all. What holiday do we celebrate that it's not about coming together?
That's fair.
I know I'm always going to mention everything, but
That's a fair question. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that and get back to you.
I like the no need for gift giving, and I
Mm,
also like that it's a group, meaning like the country celebrates holiday in the summertime. So
hmm
so you're doing outside stuff, which I really like because lots of cities have like lots of free events and you can do stuff without feeling like you had to spend a whole bunch of money. So I like that a lot
hmm hmm
about the 4th of July.
Yeah. The only problem here in Texas is it is so, like, it's stupidly
So hot.
hot. It's
Yeah.
so hot. And the last couple of years have been just like ridiculously terribly hot. And that's not going to get better. So that's sort of a bummer. Sort of a
Yeah.
bummer. But
That
otherwise,
part, other than that,
no,
that part
yeah,
is bad. It's
that part
hot.
is terrible. But
It's
other
hot in
than
Kansas
that,
City too.
I sometimes I forget that there are places in the country where summer is nice. The rest of the year is pretty nice here in Texas, but I forget that there are places where the summer is actually nice. But other than that, I love 4th of July. It's
Mhm.
wonderful.
Um, so I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Is there, do you feel like there's a such thing, because we're going to talk about family and stuff today. Do you feel like there's a such thing as work-life balance? And if so, how do you manage it?
That's such a good question. I have a we have a family friend who once he like started his own company, which I think is really successful, a few years ago. And his whole thing was like, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's just life. And
Hmm.
I kind of hold on a second. My phone is dinging because it never stops notifying me of things, even when I tell it to. So I don't
It
know.
knows
I
that your
don't know.
brain needs help.
It
It's not my
thinks
brain.
it's actually these dumb cameras. Okay.
Okay, so since we're going to talk about family, and I want to know, do you think there's a such thing as work-life balance? And if so, how do you manage it?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I think I see both sides of this. So we have a family friend who a few years ago started a business, has been really successful with it. And when he first started, though, his whole thing was, there is no such thing as work life balance. It's all just life.
Hmm.
I I think I disagree with that. I think that there is such thing as work life balance. And
Okay.
because I think if you just say, "Oh, it's all just life," then you really run the risk of not being protective of your non-work time.
Yep.
And I think the concept of work life balance is about setting boundaries and honoring the time that you have at work to really be productive and do a great job at work, but also honoring the fact that you need time away from that, both physically and mentally, in order to do the other things that are also part of your life that aren't associated with labor or making money. And so I do think that work life balance is a thing. And I I work really hard actually to achieve that. Some of the things I do, like, my work phone goes to bed
Hmm.
when the workday is over. and I don't look at it, and I don't answer emails, because I don't run an emergency kind of business. There are no emergencies for the kind
Right.
of business that I run, and I purposely set it up that way so that I could kind of achieve that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so I try to have really hard and fast rules and boundaries for when work is done. That doesn't mean that if there was some kind of training emergency that someone couldn't get a hold of me, if they really needed to, but by and large that doesn't exist. So I try to be really firm about those boundaries. What about you? What do you think?
I think that I think we have to get the language right. So I don't think I
Mm.
agree with the words work life balance because that implies that work and life are equal and you're always putting things on a scale and off a scale to make them balance out.
Oh,
And I don't think that that is possible, um, especially in this day and age. And so what I like to think of it as is work life juggle. I can only juggle so many things. Like the most experienced jugglers can do like 12 things in the air at the time, right? I know that I can basically keep about three balls in the air, but I'm juggling four. So um, everything has to give and take a little bit in order to keep those things in the air, if that makes sense.
yeah.
So while work is a challenge, and I don't want to be challenged with like not spending time with my kids and family, then that might mean that I spend a little less time with friends and a little less time on me, like sleeping and working out and stuff like that. And I can't do that for forever. So then we're going to throw that ball back up in the air and we do a little bit less at work or something like that. So to me, it's like a juggling act.
Mm.
And I still feel like it's important to have my boundaries, but I just understand that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another thing. So that by that definition, there is no balancing, right? Because otherwise, everything would get an equal share of me, and it doesn't at different times.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think that part of the way I think of it is it's not it's not always going to be perfect. Like there are some times when I am working way more hours than I would like to work because there's a project that needs to be done or there's
Hmm.
something that has to get wrapped up and there's urgency to that, and it has to
Precedent.
take priority over some other things. And then there are times when maybe there are like obviously there's stuff going on with my kids, there's a school play that I want to go to, or and that those things have to take priority. So it's not like, I don't think it's something that you can just set and say, okay,
Hmm.
these are always the boundaries and this is exactly how it's going to go all the time. There has to be some flexibility in the
Hmm.
system, um, that's built in there so that you can change priorities. I think you're like, the juggling metaphor is probably a better metaphor because you do have to change priorities sometimes. I think the thing to keep in mind is that it is a flexible system, and nothing that you're doing can be sustained forever at that rate, because
It's
life is
true.
not a static process. Everything
Yeah.
around us is changing all the time, and we have to be able to be responsive of that. And I think actually that's probably what makes it so challenging to try and find those boundaries or juggle those balls or find balance, however you want to think of it, is that you think you have it and then something changes and you got to figure it out again.
Exactly. Totally. It's kind of the thing of like, oh, you feel like, oh, when you get done with this project or this thing, then you'll have more time, and you never feel like you have more time. Like when I was breastfeeding, like that, I forgot what the stat is about that, but when you're breastfeeding, you are, essentially working another full time job because of how much time you have to spend doing it. And I thought, okay, when she's eating food, then I'll have more time. But that's really not true. I did have more time, but I guess I reallocated it immediately, because this is a moving target all the time. And so don't try to hit the target. Just try to keep the right balls in the air at the right time.
Yeah, it's like trying to keep sand out of your flip-flops at the beach. It's just not going to happen. You get the sand out, you step down, there's going to be more sand in there. That's just what it is. You just
It's just
got
what
to
it is. It's
just
just
accept
deal.
the sand.
Take your shoes off. Just take your
Take
shoes
your
off.
shoes off. It's more less chafing. Just take your shoes off.
Oh man. Um. So the real thing I want to ask you, that was a real
Mm,
question. I'm glad we talked about it. But I also want to know, since this is 4th of July,
yeah.
um, I remember a long time ago when I had I just like dog sit for a friend over the 4th of July holiday. And at this time I lived in Washington D.C. and I lived right next to the ballpark. And so I'm clueless. I'm outside walking the dog. The fireworks are going off. The dog is screaming, like running, and I'm trying to get away from me. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is too loud for this dog. We got to go figure this out. I had no preparation for that. The dog owner also gave me no preparation, so it's probably their fault too. But
You need
um,
a little bit of info if the dog is terrified of fireworks on
and
4th
we're
of
like
July.
literally one less than 1 block away from where they're doing the fireworks at.
Oh my
Like the, I mean,
gosh.
the baseball stadium was across the street from where my house was at. And so that made me be more attentive to like how auditory impacts us. And so since the fireworks are happening, who might we be more considerate of at this time
Mm.
and have some strategies around dealing with things that we can't control, like living across the street from a baseball stadium and having fireworks. How do you think about that as a healthcare professional or somebody who's been dealing with this?
Well, I mean, I think there's obviously like a couple groups of folks that are really sensitive to fireworks around this time of year. One being, obviously a lot of kids in general are scared of fireworks, especially when they're young. My kids were scared of fireworks when they were really young before they kind of understood the context of it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, anyone who has any kind of like sensory issues at all. So, kids and adults, obviously, with autism or other sensory processing disorders, can be highly affected. The group of folks that I have the most experience working with, because I've never worked in pediatrics, largely, I've always worked with adults and older adults. So the group that, beside that immediately comes to mind for me, are folks with dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of times, we think about animals, we think about kids, we think about those populations, but we don't necessarily think about people living with dementia and what their experience is of fireworks on, especially in something like 4th of July, New Year's Eve, even when, like you said, this is not something that we can control. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
family caregiver taking care of someone who has dementia on the 4th of July, you cannot control the fact that there are going to be fireworks going off, maybe all around your city or in your neighborhood. My neighborhood in Dallas is notorious for just shooting off illegal fireworks. Like, it's true. Like, I
I was just
mean,
gonna
you
say you
start
might
you
not
start
know
at
that
least
you.
like 1 to 2 weeks before the holiday, and it goes for 1 to 2 weeks after the holiday,
Mm-hmm.
like just shooting off fireworks. And of course, on the holiday itself, it's nuts, it's insane, it's everywhere. So, um, so we can't control that. So what can we do? What can caregivers of people with dementia do in order to make that experience less scary and stressful for the the person that they're caring for? So that's a good question. And I have some kind of general ways to think about this, and then I have some really specific tips
Okay.
as well. So
But
yeah.
before you dive into solutions, which I like
Uh-huh.
solutions too, can you talk a little bit more about like how somebody might notice that this is a problem? Because it might not be a problem for everybody with dementia, right? So like, how would you know that this is like a thing that you need to deal with?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And so a lot of this can also depend on the stage of dementia that someone is in terms
Hmm.
of whether or not it's an issue and also how you might manage it. And keep in mind that from year to year, this might change because dementia and the diseases that cause dementia are progressive, right?
Hmm.
So what maybe is not bothersome one year and you can have a relatively normal holiday, the next year might not go as smoothly. Um, so what are some things that you can look out for? Unfortunately, you may not know that this is going to be a problem until you're in the moment and that first firework goes off and it becomes a problem. But and you'll know, um, increased anxiety, increased agitation, fearfulness, wanting to run and hide, folks thinking that they are in war zones.
Hmm.
These kinds of, they're explosions, and they can be really really triggering for people from many walks of life who of course don't necessarily have dementia either. People who have PTSD who have been in war zones can be triggered by fireworks
Hmm.
on the 4th of July. So think if you are a veteran or someone who's lived through a war who is now also living with dementia and doesn't have the ability to contextualize what is
Mm-hmm.
happening right there, how potentially triggering that could be and how frightening that could be. So, you might see, like I said, people are acting frightened, anxious, wanting to run, wanting to hide, wanting to fight, particularly for folks who maybe have like Lewy body or dementia with Lewy body. These can be really difficult scenarios. Folks who have dementia with Lewy body are more likely to suffer from delusions, which are kind of false beliefs. And so,
Mm-hmm.
how are these essentially, in their eyes, bombs exploding outside, playing into their perception of the world? So, I don't know if I feel like I just started rambling a little bit, but as I do. But did that kind of answer
Yeah,
your
I just
question?
wanted to make sure that people could understand when they should pay attention to that.
Hey there, it's Emilia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the Care Lab team, and here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So, whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
Like most things, if somebody has dementia, they're not always going to be able to say, I hear fireworks and that's scaring me or triggering me. And can we do something about it? It's often behavioral based, right?
Yeah.
And especially if they're at a stage in which they have other behaviors that are difficult maybe to deal with, you might think it's just like another, you might not recognize that that's the impulse or the stimulus that's causing that. And so I just wanted people to be aware that they should pay attention to that. And then like, what are the triggers that might make you be like, oh, this is about the sounds, because you might just tune it out, right? Like you're used to it, doesn't bother you, you know it's going to happen, and so you're not even that aware of it, if that makes sense, because it doesn't bother
Yeah.
you so much. So that's what
Yeah,
I just wanted to
absolutely.
say.
Absolutely. And I think the other kind of side of that is because you may not be aware that this is going to be triggering or problematic until that first firework goes off, kind of planning ahead to have some strategies in place in case it is, and being ready to implement those. But I like that you point that out, because so often we attribute the behaviors that we're seeing in people with dementia, or the emotions that they're experiencing, just to the disease, or we think they're being unreasonable, or it can be frustrating, and it can be frustrating and difficult to deal with this stuff. But the fact is, kind of regardless of all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
what they're experiencing is a natural human emotion and reaction to the experience that they are having as an individual. So we do have to stay tuned in order to figure out sometimes what the root cause of that reaction, of that emotional response, is going to be. And actually, this also leads really well. So when I teach about dementia and dementia care at Higher Standards Caregiver Training, I teach under the DEFT care model. That's that's the model that I came up with to teach with for Higher Standards Caregiver Training. It's the model that we use, kind of the umbrella, to help people think about caring for someone with dementia, and we can kind
Mm-hmm.
of use it here. So DEFT stands for distraction, empathy, flexibility, familiarity, and tuned in. So you already
Okay.
nailed that last one there, because we do need to be taught. We do need to be thinking about, okay, well, what's the root cause here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like really first of all, did you come up with that model
Hmm.
and that acronym?
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's mine.
And you should trademark it. And
I
then
actually wrote, can I tell you something? I actually wrote a book. I'm in the process of seeking like an agent and a publisher right now for, there's a whole book
nice.
based on the DEFT care tool that's coming at you, hopefully
It's coming.
sooner rather than later.
I can't wait. That's awesome. And then if I could draw like a parallel, because like I think that when we look at a person, especially if it's our parent, right? You don't just see a human being. You see a mother, an adult, a person who taught you, a person who raised you. And then when they now have dementia, you still see all that stuff. And you don't necessarily apply the same skills that you might have applied in a different situation, like a baby who can't talk, right? And so when a kid doesn't have words, yet you use essentially similar thought processes around
Totally.
like what stimuli is happening around them that I can impact change on, and will that improve their situation? Right? Are they hungry? Is their diaper wet? Do they want some attention to play? Like what those things are as you learn and grow as a parent, and you start to modulate that in order to see if that helps your kid. And I'm not going to say do it intuitively, because you definitely had to learn it when you had your first kid,
Yeah.
but
I
you
do, I
learn it
remember,
fast.
like, I remember taking my son home from the hospital, my first son, and sitting in the back of the car with him, my husband's driving, and thinking to myself, oh my God, I have no idea what to do with this thing. And I had already been like a healthcare provider I'm like, I'm supposed to be trained in like human development and all of these things, and I do not know what to do. And I was so terrified.
Exactly. And you learn fast because you learn on the job,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to do this naturally. And I think it's really important for people to recognize that they kind of already have these skills, especially if they've been a parent. You probably learned some of these skills in other ways. People who are teachers, people, you just learn how to pick up on cues and feedback from others, and then change what's going on around you in order to improve that situation. And if you think about your work and your life and who you encounter, you probably have these skills. It's just that you don't think to apply them in the situation of dealing with a parent with dementia, because that's not the context in which you're coming at it. And so it's just like kind of important to like have a model, for example, to frame this around.
Yeah, I also think the idea of having like a tool or a model to think about here is to make it really easy to kind of access different types of
Mm-hmm.
strategies that you might use,
Mm-hmm.
because when you are in the moment with someone and it's a scary or stressful moment, or you're stressed out, they're stressed out, it's very hard to think clearly at that time. So you need something that you can kind of like
Run
reach
back to.
right into, run through it, and figure out what a possible solution is, from the toolkit that's in front of you really quickly without having to think super hard about it. And that's kind of part of what I was trying to achieve also in creating DEFT was, saying, okay, this is something that's easy to remember. You can really run through this fast, and it's going to hit on 90% of the tools you actually need in order to like make the situation better.
Cool. Okay, so we talked about how to identify it as maybe
Mm-hmm.
a problem. And so
Mm-hmm.
now, okay, I'm in the moment, and I've recognized that this auditory stimuli from all of these fireworks are causing a huge to do in my household. What do I do about it?
Yeah. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that almost always context is everything, right?
Hmm.
And how you are going to use the context either to your advantage by kind of creating some context about what they're hearing, or understanding if you have to just block that off if it's too much sensory input, if it's too distracting, or a combination of those things, kind of depends on where this person is in their journey. So someone who is like an earlier to like maybe middle stage dementia, who can still be reoriented to the context of Independence Day,
Hmm.
then we want to kind of use context to redirect them to what is actually going on. So some really simple ways to do this. There are fireworks going on outside. I guarantee you there's a fireworks display that you can watch on your TV, right? It's being
Mm.
broadcast. So turn on, and if it's possible, if let's say it's your local city's, big firework display and that is actually what's being broadcast, if that's possible to turn that on, that's great, because then the booms line up with the actual lights and everything. But even if it doesn't exactly, having some kind of context is helpful there in that moment, to help reorient people to say, nope, this is Independence Day, it's 4th of July, we're not under attack right now, everything's okay. So creating some context around in that moment can be really helpful. One of the other things that you can do
Hold on,
is
before you
sort
go
of
there, it's like that's a great idea. Let's pause on that. That's a great idea. And for the situation in which you just said, like, people might be shooting fireworks 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after, you could really just like YouTube a fireworks display and put it on the TV and just have that mug running, so that every time they come through that room, they see that fireworks, and then you're like, oh, okay. Because, you might forget that. You could orient somebody in the morning and say, hey, it's 4th of July. We might have fireworks. Don't be scared. And they might get that at that moment, but then they might not have that thought again in the moment that they're having the fireworks. So if it's just running on a screen somewhere, that's a trigger, a point.
Yeah, and I think so it's really powerful to have these kind of visual cues and context in the environment when you're caring for someone with dementia, because as you said, you could tell them in the morning, they're probably not going to remember that night.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the nature of dementia, is that we lose the memories that are most recent more quickly. That's why people can't remember what they had for lunch, but they can remember the name of their doctor 25 years ago. It's because those old memories are in there. It's very hard to lay down new memories with dementia. So it's unlikely that you're going to orient someone in the morning and they're going to be fine that afternoon. Or frankly, even 5 minutes from now. That doesn't mean that you don't talk to someone, soothe them, tell them that it's okay, tell them what's going on. But their reality is their reality from moment to moment. And so using context in the environment can be really helpful. So if you have like decorations for 4th of July, put the decorations out, so that it's not just what's here in front of them. It's not just what they're hearing, but when they look around again, and this is best for folks with maybe early to middle stage dementia who are going to be more goal oriented. They're going to hopefully remember what Independence Day is, and have some context around that. Then they can see, oh, I heard that. Oh, that's a firework. And they can help kind of self-soothe and come to that conclusion on their own. When you have someone who's maybe a little further along in the process, who maybe Independence Day doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot to them anymore, you can still kind of use those same cues or those same tricks, but you might also, and you can see if that works. Because here's the other thing: there's no one solution. There's not a single magic pill or tool in your toolkit that's going to work 100% of the time for everyone. That's why we have a toolkit. This one didn't work, we're going to reach. So then we're going to try it. It didn't work. We're going to reach and we're going to pull something else out. Right. So you can try all those things. If they don't work, you can also go towards something that's going to kind of decrease that sensory input and redirect them from the experience that they're having. That is really difficult to do with auditory stimuli, especially because auditory stimuli is one of the things that we pay attention to the most, and kind of almost upfront and foremost throughout our entire lives, right? We can hear in the womb. When we're still developing, we can hear in the womb. So it's one of the last things to go away, assuming people still are able to hear. So what can you do for that? So I recommend, and this actually works well for the other context too. If you can have, what's some other things that we do with fireworks? We play music, right? We play some patriotic music with them. Get some headphones. You can always use noise canceling headphones, but sometimes those are hard to keep on someone. If they don't understand why there are headphones on them, they're going to pull them off. So having headphones that are actually playing music to help cancel out the big booms that are going around them, and also provide um, kind of a therapeutic calming influence, or again some context for maybe watching the fireworks on TV or whatever else is going on. That can be a really good tool to use. And I think honestly, if you have someone who's really not handling it well, you're having a difficult time creating any kind of orientation through the context, um, then popping on some noise canceling headphones that also play music is one of the fastest, like, quick solutions that you can use to help calm the situation if there's a lot of fear going on related to those fireworks.
Yeah, especially if they're like a Bluetooth kind, so that you don't have to have a cord running and a phone or something connected to them. So it's one less thing to mess with.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, that's an awesome solution.
It's, and like I said, you can tie that in for someone who's watching the fireworks on TV, tie in the audio that they're playing, the music that they're playing along with it into the headphones, or just turn on some patriotic music, turn on whatever music they like. Whatever they find soothing, put that on so they're watching, they've got that going along with the fireworks. And then it can turn from something that is really scary and disorienting to a good experience, something that's really positive, and actually a moment for you all to share together that is creating, a new positive experience, and for you, a new memory of your loved one. And that's a really
Hmm.
important thing for caregivers to be able to access during this time too, because holidays are really tough when you have lost someone, when you're caring for someone that maybe you are kind of losing slowly.
Hmm.
Holidays are really, really hard. So if you can find an opportunity to really be with that person in that moment and create meaning right then and there, that's very, very powerful, not just for the person that you're with, but for you as a caregiver too. And we can always find opportunities for meaning and connection. That's one of the really beautiful things about caring for someone with dementia, is like, if you search for it, those moments can be so profound and wonderful, and you can find that even in these kinds of tough situations.
Care Lab really makes it easy to set those boundaries, like for me, it really makes it easier to communicate, especially with caregivers. So whether you're in the role of trying to be full communication, trying to be a caregiver, or for you, I'm so proud that you were able to partner together with me. I looked to you as a caregiver. There are caregivers that have really great occupational skills that you have a different challenge with in how to care for someone differently. So if you're going to do something better and for a loved one, you are going to be able to do it with a caregiver. Or if you're a professional who's trained to care for people, you'll be able to do that. And you can even also get quotes from higher skilled higher skilled caregivers. I think it's such an important point, and I think we've had quite a few episodes where we talked about caregiving and creating boundaries and taking time for yourself, and I think all of that is good. I'm not disclaiming any of that, but I think the one thing that we don't talk enough about is like actually finding meaning in the here and now with that person you're caring for, and creating new memories for yourself. Maybe they don't remember it, but if they're enjoying it in the moment and you can enjoy it, then you guys have created an opportunity to enjoy each other together, right? It's just in a new and different way than it used to be, as opposed to it being reminiscent and doing a same thing that y'all have done for a particular holiday, for another year, another 2 years, or whatever. And maybe you can't access that because they are not that same person anymore who used to bake the cookies and do the thing. But you can create new memories in the moment. And even though dementia is such a really terrible thing to watch a person go through, the one joy of it is their ability to be in the moment and just to be like, have this, like, oh wow, this thing that you do regularly, I don't know, make something in the kitchen and have that be like a joyful occasion. They're like, oh, this tastes amazing. Maybe this is her recipe and she made it for 30 years, but now y'all making it together and she's just like lights up in joy because of how good it is. Of course it is, because she made it. This is her recipe. But like just to have that moment, I think are really important to try to facilitate and then to enjoy, because um
Because otherwise, what's the
that's
point,
still there.
actually? Yeah.
Yeah. Because
There.
that's the whole point. That's still there. Everything doesn't have to feel like work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that
Mhm.
we should take joy in that. There's so many things to be stressed out and worried about. And I'm not denying that, but it's so important to have those moments of joy
Mhm. Yeah.
and orchestrate them if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Be open to them. So I think this is a good time to kind of like review, because it can feel overwhelming to think about all these things at once. So I want to kind
Sure.
of put it into context for how you might think about these things if you're like, okay, DEFT, what does this all mean here? So
Mm-hmm.
so D for distraction. Distraction is really about what's going on around that person. In this context, we're thinking about the fireworks going off, all these big sounds. Okay, so how can we use distraction to our advantage? We're creating a context that kind of explains what's happening that feels familiar. We'll get to that. That's the F for familiar, right? Um, and we're also using distraction, perhaps. We're using distraction to our advantage as well. We're redirecting people with music. Maybe we're redirecting them to put some headphones on them, give them a task that they can do. So that we're managing that environment in that context. So we're thinking about distraction as, what is overly stimulating here that we can remove, and how can we provide something else to do that's going to put this person in a better place, and hopefully also put caregiver in a better place too. um,
Mm-hmm.
the E for empathy, so important. Understanding the experience. Why is this person reacting this way in this moment? Okay, well, let me think. Well, mom mom lived through this war, and maybe this is really triggering for her. Or maybe mom didn't live through a war, dad didn't live through a war, but what they hear right now is separated from the idea of a celebration. They're just hearing big scary sounds going off right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're having this reaction because for them this is genuinely experience. This is a scary experience. I can put myself in their shoes and understand maybe why they might be feeling that way. And when we can put ourselves in other people's shoes, it makes it a lot easier to understand not just their how they're behaving and their emotions, but also maybe what we can do to help make that better. We want to
Yep.
be, first F, flexible, understanding that maybe 4th of July won't look the way that it always looks for us. Maybe we can't take mom or dad out to, or spouse or whoever it is, out to that big neighborhood gathering that we usually do. Maybe that's not safe for us anymore. Maybe we need to do this a different way. Maybe we can't reminisce the same way that we used to, but I can be flexible in this moment. We can we can make this into positive, and we can find a way to get through this and find joy together. The F, familiar, that goes back to context, right? We want to keep things
Mm-hmm.
familiar as much as possible. Remember, those old memories go away way, way later than new memories do. New memories are
Mm-hmm.
hard to put down, but we retain stuff that happened to us a long time ago. So how can we keep
Yeah.
things as familiar as possible in that context to help facilitate a good experience? And then that T that you first nailed right on the head, staying tuned into the person. Okay, at first this was pretty fun. We had the music going, we had fireworks going, and then it started to get to be a little bit too much. Now it looks like mom or dad or spouse or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is getting a little overloaded. Now it's time to calm things down so that we
Mm-hmm.
can continue having a good night. So just, again, if you can't remember anything else, just thinking, okay, how can I be deft here? How can I think about distraction, empathy? Am I being flexible? Is this familiar? Am I tuned in? And you can solve a lot. You can really make a lot of situations a lot better, kind of pulling from that toolkit.
That's amazing. I appreciate all of those suggestions. I think they're super useful, and especially the model of being able to think through those five things in the moment, not just for Fourth of July, but anytime. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's great.
I'm trying to think. I feel like, oh, there was one more thing that I think that we should talk about relating to this, and that is, especially on holidays, we do sometimes feel the need to reminisce, to talk about how things used to be, or to bring up old memories. Sometimes that can often be really difficult for folks with dementia, because they, at a certain point, they may not remember those things, they may not remember people's names. And
Hmm.
so while you can reminisce with someone that you're caring for who has dementia, you have to be careful that you are not you're not putting demands on them to try and recall or remember, or, you know, go back to the way that they used to be. So if you keep reorienting someone and saying, it's okay, mom, it's just 4th of July, and that's not working, then that reorienting with you verbally doing it is probably not helping. In fact, it may actually be increasing mom's stress,
Anxiety.
because now mom thinks she's supposed to be able to do something that she really can't do. And, you know, if you kind of think about putting yourself in that position, if someone kept asking you to do something that you couldn't do, would that make you feel more calm, or would that make you feel more agitated? Don't ask me to do calculus. I cannot do that.
I cannot do it. Why do you keep asking me?
Yeah, I will get agitated if you keep trying to get me to solve that problem, because I don't even know. I don't know. I don't
I don't know.
know.
I don't know the first step to what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Exactly.
So
So you can reminisce, you know, bring out pictures, but look at the pictures together and just notice things. Don't ask for memories. Um, you know, and try to make sure that we want to try to make sure that we're not arguing with the reality that people are in right there in and of themselves. We can't argue with other people's experiences ever. That
uh-huh.
just doesn't work. No one is open to having their own experience challenged. It doesn't matter if we have dementia or not. So we have to keep that in mind when we're caring for someone who has dementia, that we don't want to challenge the experience that they're having. Instead, if they're having a tough time or a negative experience, we want to create an environment and a context where we can redirect them into having a more positive experience, and just let them know that, like, you're safe. You're safe. I'm here with you. We're together. Sometimes that's the only thing that's really important anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. I think those are great suggestions. And if anybody has more questions or needs more help and guidance, the one other thing I would add is that the Alzheimer's Association has a lot of really great videos about how to deal with dementia and manage it. And so, if you wanted to dive into more content, you can find that at Alzheimer's Association website. You can also find those same videos at AskSammy.com as a reference, and just like work together. Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. And
All
if
right,
anybody's
everyone.
finding good benefit in this content and they like the show, even if you don't like the show, go ahead. If you made it to the end of the episode, you should be subscribing and sharing with a friend. So, yeah. And tell us why you don't like it or why you do like it in the comments. We'd
I
love to
mean,
talk to you.
if you don't like the show and you made it to the end, I feel like there's some sort of
You might be in
miscommunication happen.
denial.
You might be in denial, because I don't waste time on things that I don't like. So if you made it to the end, you probably do love us. You
So
probably
just,
do.
just go ahead and
Just
subscribe.
go ahead and subscribe. You'll come around. It's gonna be
Right.
okay. You'll come around. Um, happy 4th of July. Be safe out there, everyone. Take good care of yourselves and the people around you, and we'll see you next time on Care Lab.
Bye.
Bye.